Let's build a Data Studio community visualization, part 7. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created cross-filter interactions for my table visualization. So if I click on this mobile, I want everything else to filter for only mobile device category. If I click desktop, I want to filter everything for desktop. And if I re-click on this, I want the filter to be cleared. As in the last video, I am not writing the code live since it is complex and too much code to show in a video. We will discuss my solution and the difficulties I had when adding chart interactions. But first, we check the documentation to get an idea what we need. You will learn everything you need to start with interactions in the community library reference. Let me scroll down to the Send Interactions paragraph. And here you will see that there's a function for sending interactions. And let's see the code example. Here it says we need an action ID. We have to figure out what this is. We have to set a filter, which looks like it is a constant. And then we need a field ID and a data value. We put these two into these interaction data, and then we call the DSCC send interaction function with our action ID, our filter, and the interaction data. There's some more information about the interaction data. Here you will see an example where you can put two dimensions. So you need both dimension IDs, the ID for the first and for the second. And there's even an example for filtering for two values at the same time. So we have one dimension combination and another. So this is what the interaction data should look like in this case. And below you will find the clear interaction function, which you can use if you want to unset your filter. For this clear interaction function, you just need your action ID and then this filter again. The interaction ID can be configured in the config.json. You will see the interactions variable here, which has an element with the ID crossFilter. In my case, I named it crossFilter, and the supported actions filter. Filter is the only supported action right now, so you can only select this. So this interaction config ID is crossFilter in our case. When I read the library reference, I thought sending interactions is not too complicated. But I ran into some pitfalls that I want to share with you now. So here's what you should think about. At first, there's the question if you want to use multi-select filters. In my case, this was not the problem, because I only wanted to select one row in my table and then I wanted to filter the other tables or the other visualizations. But for other visualizations, this could be a scenario and you have to be aware of this. What should happen with the clicked element? In my table visualization, the row that's been clicked should have a bold font. What should happen to the non-clicked elements? In my table visualization, the non-clicked rows should be a little lighter, so I want to blend them out a little bit, but not as much that you don't see them anymore. Are all elements visible when you set up the listener or when you do the interaction? Well, this may be a little specific for my table visualization because there's a pager where you can switch between different pages of the table. So not all the data is visible at the beginning or where you click a row to filter it. Do you want to rebuild your visualization right after the click? Data Studio is sending messages right after the interaction happened. If you don't pay attention to this, your visualization will render again. If this takes some time, this may be a problem. In my case, I did not want this to happen. If I have bigger tables with more than 1,000 rows and some comparison functions, it may take a second or even 2 seconds to build up this table. For more than 10,000 rows, even longer. So if a user clicks on a row to filter it, I do not want him to wait a couple seconds. And in my case, because I did not want to rebuild, if the user clicks your interaction, then clicks another interaction, how do you want your interaction to be then? So this is very specific, and maybe I didn't write this question very good, but if I do not want to re-render my visualization right after the interaction, and then the user clicks another interaction on another visualization, I have to re-render my chart. So I have to consider this case. And finally, what has to happen to clear the interaction? In my case, if a user re-clicks any row, I want to clear the interaction. So it doesn't matter if he clicks the row that is not selected right now or if he clicks the row that is selected. I just want to clear it, and if he re-clicks it again, then he sends the new interaction. My first idea was like, hey, I just have to get these dimension IDs and these dimension values as attributes to my table rows. And then I create an event listener to send the interactions. And when I add some attributes to the selected and non-selected rows, I do some CSS to style them as I wanted. This would have worked if I didn't have this pager feature in my table and all the rows are not visible at the same time. But I used most of this method. So here's how I wrote it. At first, there's a condition. If this data interactions cross-filter value type equals filter, then we'll do all the things I'm going to talk about. This is basically asking if the cross-filter is set on or set off. In the next few rows, you will see the event listener that is applied to the tab body. I called it tab body because it is the table body that we currently see. My first idea was that we applied the event listener to all of our body rows, but we do not see all of them. And if we use the pager, we have different body rows. So this wasn't the best solution. Inside of the addEventlistener, I requested the body rows again. So again, these are all of the rows in my table that are currently visible. And then I had to find the selected row that was just clicked. In the next two lines, you see some code where I try to find the parent row of the clicked element, because the clicked element is mostly a cell and not the row. But I do not like this code very much. I think the closest function to find the row would be much more efficient. But anyway, I save the selected row inside my select row variable. So if we can find this, then we continue with the code. And we do a for loop for all of our body rows that are currently visible. And then we compare the body rows inner HTML with my select row inner HTML. If it is the same, then it means that this is the row that has just been clicked. So we have two options now. Either the table has not been filtered before, or the table has been filtered before and the click on this row should clear the interaction. For this, I use the filter attributes. So if the filter is not none, it means it's basically on or off, we have to clear this interaction because there's already an interaction in place for this table that we have to clear now. So we take all of our body rows, and for each of them we set the filter to none because we want to clear it. And here the special thing with my pager comes in place. I have a new variable called main table with all the rows inside that we have in our whole table. And these are some attributes as well, and I can set these to none as well. So when I use the pager and go to the next page, the new rows will all behave just as I want. The second case is that there are no interactions for this table right now. So in this case, we query the row that has just been selected, which we can do with this code, and set the attribute filter to on. And for all of our other rows in the main table variable, we can set the filter to off. And also, if we use the pager again, we have to make sure that if we come back to the current page, our selected row is still on. So we have to set the filter attribute to on also in our main table for the selected row. After this, we can build the interaction. And for these interactions, I want to show you the dimension IDs and the dimension values that I created for the rows in my HTML code. Here we have a new table with device category, landing page, users and new users. And if I check the HTML code, I see these cells, and for the TR elements, which are the rows, I created some data dimension IDs, which are comma separated, and the dimension IDs from the fields. And I created the data dimension values, and I had to create an attribute for each value, because if I would have done it with comma separation as well, I wouldn't know if there's a comma inside of the value. So there's the dimension value 1 and the dimension value 0 here. So the 0 belongs to the first ID and the 1 belongs to the second ID. So we can get these attributes from the selected row and just split them by comma for the dimension IDs. And for our dimension values, we have to do a for loop for the length of our array for the concepts. So for the length of our dimensions, which is 2 in our case, and then we push the different values to our array values that we created before. And this is our interaction data then. So after this, we can send the interaction with our send interaction function. I wrote an extra function for this, so let's check where we use it again. So here's our interaction function with the data, and you see that here we have our filter, and we use dscc send interaction for our cross filter with this filter variable and the data we are sending. We are doing the same thing for our clear interaction, but we do not use any data in there because it's not needed. As I said before, I do not want my table to render again right after the user clicked any row. For bigger tables, this would take some time. But Data Studio will send messages to the visualization anyway. Therefore, I had to find out what type of message my visualization is currently dealing with. So in my dscc subscribe to data function, I'm not using my drawVis function anymore. I'm working with a pre-render check function that I created. And in my pre-render check, I'm comparing the last data with the current data. So I'm comparing the new vis data with the all data variable, which is the data from the last message this function got. And when I draw a new visualization, I set the all data to the new data. I do the same thing with the filter data. I define these as a global variable, and then I can compare the old filter data with the new filter data. Here you see I put the new filter data variable with our new filter data. Then I check if the filter data is empty. If it is empty, I just set it to the new filter data. And if it's equal, I assume that the filter data has not changed, so I can re-render the data. I can do a rebuild with my drawvis. I even have a little loader animation that runs right before. But if my old filter data is not equal to my new filter data, I can assume that only the filter data changes. Because in these cases, Data Studio will send messages with only the new interaction data. So I'm not calling my drawvis function in this case. I'm just applying some CSS if the new filtered data is undefined, which would mean that the old interaction was cleared, to query all of my body rows and unset the filter element for all of them. Using this pre-render function to find out the type of message was very useful for me when I optimized the performance. Another example, when a user dragged the table from one place to another or changed the size of the table, there were so many messages sent that a bigger table could crash. In these cases, the previous stringified data was the same as the new stringified data. So I made my drawvis function only do some CSS changes then, and the performance increased drastically. So that's it for today, and also for this video series. This was the last Let's Build video about community visualizations for now. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments. Feel free to play around with my custom table some more. You will find the link in the video description again. And have fun with creating your own visualization. Bye bye.